Thank you. As usual, we'll be waiting just a few minutes to let attendees join to the Zoom meeting. So thank you, those of you who have joined us in person and who are joining us on the Zoom call now. We'll get started shortly. All right, thank you again for joining us. I will now call this board workshop of South Whitby School District School Board to order. We'll begin with our land acknowledgement. Marnie.
Thank you. South Whitby School District acknowledges that we gather on the ancestral homelands, originally known as Chakolchi in Lushootseed, of the Coast Salish peoples, on the lands of the Lower Skagit, Tulalip, Swinomish, Snohomish, Stillaguamish, and Suquamish, who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin since time immemorial, who have hunted, fished, and gathered here, and who have taken care of these lands. We respect their sovereignty and their right to self-determination, and we honor their sacred spiritual connections with the land and the water. Please join us in expressing our deepest respect for the Indigenous people of this territory and our gratitude for their enduring care and protection of this land, which we currently occupy and share through the Treaty of Point Elliott, signed by 82 tribes in Mukilteo on January 22nd, 1855.
Thank you very much. We have a very tight agenda here today, just one item. I will note if anyone, this is a board workshop, so if anyone wants to discuss the topics that we are discussing as we go through this, please join in. If you're on the Zoom call, please just use the Q&A function to drop your name and location so we know that you have something that you're typing. And then you can go ahead and start typing and we'll know it's coming so we won't rush on ahead. If someone here in person has questions or comments, we welcome you to join in. Please do start, at least since there's only two of you, start your first comment with your name and location, and then afterwards we'll know it's you. So today we are talking about future planning for the school district. And that's something that we've actually gotten a chance to really dig into since we've gotten caught up on the tactile things. We can start looking at the strategic, and that makes me very happy. And last time we discussed that Dr. Moshe was going to have some ideas on what to do about our infrastructure and our enrollment and present them to us so we can discuss those. And then we'll focus first on the presentation and questions and comments on it. And then we'll go on from there to what something like that or related to that or alternative to that might mean for the district. Dr. Moshe.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. So tonight, what I'd really like us to focus on are our facilities, our enrollment, and the potential we have for some modification. So first and foremost, I can actually move my screen. There we go. So we know our vision and our mission, and we want lifelong learners who are multiculturally engaged, literate, and ready to be an active community member. And in the board's decision-making this summer, they set goals for the district. And goal number 3, as you can see, is craft and begin implementing plans for best use of our district assets in the future of the district, including the execution of a facilities bond. So in order to prepare ourselves for a bond or anything else, we need to know where we are. So one of the things that I want to talk about is the enrollment, the census, and each of our schools and their current use. I know the board has heard this information many, many times, but just to bring us back to center, here's the census data. I want us to focus on the 0 to 5 population and the 5 to 17 population. And what you can see that from 2010 to 2020, those two populations have diminished on the island. So it's pretty clear that our enrollment trend that we are seeing is, there's a reason for it. Our population is aging, and we simply don't have students at that age at the rate we used to have them. We still have them, just not at the same rate.
If I could stop you there for a second.
Sure.
I just wanted to note, I was curious about the school age population versus our current head count. So being the nerd that I am, I looked up some information and ran some numbers. Based on the US government census and the, what is that? The National Center for Educational Statistics, which is also on a .gov. From 2015 to 2019, we had about 62.9% of the school age population enrolled in South Louis School District in our public schools. So about almost 63%. Now, in 2022, those two numbers mean 74.3% of the school age population is now enrolled in South Louis School District. So although our gross numbers have gotten lower, the percentage of the available student age population on South Whidbey that attends South Whidbey School District has grown greatly. Just wanted to put that out there because there are a lot of narratives out there about we're losing students to other schools, and we've actually gained student share significantly. Thank you. I just wanted to point that out.
And in conjunction with that, we have always kept track of, because we have to, the population of students who are either homeschooled or in private schools. And so that trend data holds true. That population is, we actually are getting more of the students in the community. So you're spot on. It still doesn't change this part of the narrative, which is that since 2000, our enrollment has continued on this trend, and our anticipated enrollment 2 weeks from now for 22-23 is 1,049 students and 64 students in our ALE program. Again, that will change. We get enrollment updates from Dan monthly, but that's basically our trend. So what does it mean? It means that we continue to shrink. We have done this over time, and we have to continue to respond to that. And part of what I want to talk about is how are we going to use our facilities, not in 2 weeks for the current year, but a year from now. So this is very preliminary. What I'm asking the board to do, though, is to consider it now in the next 4 weeks, so that if we are making changes, we have the year to implement those changes and plan together with staff and community. So I'm going to start with the very down-to-earth portion of this, which is how do we use our buildings? So this is the North Campus at the elementary school, and this is the use. How do I get rid of that up at the corner? I don't see it on my screen. See that? Well, you see how we're up
The
in the screen
picture in
there?
picture.
Yeah. That is covering a room that says 2-3 multi-age. It's room 208, just for context. At any rate, this building, starting in September, has 3 vacant rooms in it. It just so happens we have 3 sections of grade 5 not in this building, just for the sake of perspective. We also are using many classrooms. I always equate it to when someone has a large house and there's only 2 people in the large house, they may use all the rooms in the large house, but they don't really have to. So we have several rooms that are being utilized, but don't necessarily have to be utilized in that way. Whether it's counseling or Orca reading, we have 2 special education teachers and they each have 2 rooms that they're using. So again, don't want to move people now, but the idea of having 3 sections of grade 5 in this building next year, it's not out of the picture. This building was a K-5 building until not too long ago. We changed it within the last 5 years. So to utilize it in this way next year is certainly possible. We're going into this school year with 335 students and 14 sections K-4. So the South Campus, this one, I may get up and just for context sake, show you what's happening here. We have rentals already in this building, and we also, again, are utilizing more rooms than needed. And I'm kind of going all over, but it will make sense by the time I'm finished, okay? So for example, if we look over here, this is band for 5th and 6th grade. And I'm jumping ahead, but if we went K-5, 6, 12, these rooms wouldn't be needed here because band would be 6, 12. We have 1 teacher for band. That person would no longer have to travel to this school. They could be only at the high school. There would also continue to be 5th grade band. But again, the scheduling would be such that that individual could go to the elementary school, for example, at the end of the day for elementary, having done a full day at the high school. So those are the things that I'm looking at, looking ahead. This room is vacant. We could leave garden where it is because it's adjacent to the garden. This art class serves 5th and 6th grade. That same teacher teaches K-4 art. They could stay at the elementary, be teaching K-5 art. This room wouldn't be needed. So again, another whole section just about that we're out of. This is already rented to mother mentors and to our early childhood special needs program through the county. These 2 rooms are for ALE. They can easily move, one to the North Campus, one to the high school building, both to one side or the other. We even have alternative sites. So not concerned about ALE. I know they've moved here from another location this year, but again, a year from now, can they move elsewhere? These 5, 6 sections, 5th grade staying at the K-4, it would become K-5. 6th grade could potentially move to the 7-12 site. And we'll talk about what that might look like, but I want to just stick with this building. Again, the special education space, you saw the space being used at the elementary site. Plenty of room if we change this up. Wynn already rents this kitchen, and this is a PE space. So again, it's well utilized, but we've moved into the space because it exists. The one thing that may or may not change is this section here that's in orange, that's the D building. There are many little offices in there. We may still utilize that in the short term. So if we did this, what would happen? And I'm going to open this up for conversation pretty quickly. The high school campus, the 7-12 campus, clearly has the room for the 6-8 to be at that campus. These rooms up top that are 201, 200, and across are the current 7th and 8th grade. We have not made a plan yet for where those 6-8 students would be, but we're committed to having them separate from the 7-12, from the 9-12, their own entrance potentially, and not this crossover. The big plus would be, it would be a 6-8 program again. So I know we're going to have discussion and questions. I've highlighted some that have come to me already, and I'm sure there will be more. The administrative team is here as well, and I expect this part to be much more about conversation. The only thing I've shown you is that we can do it. The space is there to do it. The question is, do we want to do it, and why would we do it? So just to walk through what we've come up with so far, just in terms of my own brainstorming and some conversation, the biggest issue for us right now is staffing, and will continue to be staffing for our students. It's difficult to stretch one person across 3 sites, and we have some folks who are doing that. There are things that are not offered, for example, at the 5-6 that could be offered if it became a K-5. STEM, for example. Band would continue to be offered. The art teacher would have more time to address K-5 art. We could share 6-12 teachers. If a teacher's a math teacher, maybe they can teach middle school and high school, because the schedule would have to be aligned to do that, but they would be in the same building. We wouldn't lose time with them going to a different school or figuring out a different schedule. Certainly there would be many more enrichment opportunities if you had a 6th grader who was capable of taking 8th or 9th grade math, for example. They could do it easily. If you had a student in 7th grade or 8th grade who wanted to move up, they can do that now, but it gives 6th graders an opportunity as well. Athletics, we've had a request for 6th grade students to participate in athletics. Not only is the school day timing different, it's a different site that they'd have to get to. Certainly cleaning and upkeep, heating and lighting, that would be a reduction. This last one may happen regardless of facilities use, because our enrollment is such that we might be able to do 1 bus run and start the school day a little bit later for the 7-12 and a little bit earlier for the K-5, which is in everyone's best interest. We haven't calculated cost savings. We know that we'll save. We know that we'll save in staffing. We know that we'll save in custodial services. And depending on what the board decides they want us to pursue, we could even gain rental fees. So again, the cost, we haven't calculated that. This is really about, we have more space than we need, and how can we best utilize our space? It's also about, if we're going into a bond, which facilities do we want to focus on? So other ways to cut cost, we're always looking ways to cut costs. We went through that this spring. But again, that's not the major reason for this. That is a benefit, certainly. And other uses of the building. We already rent some space. Could we potentially join the housing conversation? That's something I certainly think is worthy to pursue. Next week, when we talk with our community, I'm going to bring the land use into the discussion as well, because I think that's a piece of this conversation. This is very specific about where we want to house our students. And again, challenges we've seen, I want to stop doing the talking and let this question be out to the admin team and the rest of us. What have we seen, and what opportunities, and so on. So we've got, go ahead, somebody jump in. John?
John and I will chat.
Okay.
John, I interned with Mr. Patton here, so we've found our flow with regard to communication and collaboration. And I think as much as it worked before, we continue to, a lot of it is just communication and trying to get ahead of things. So from my perspective and my lens, and of course we need to have this conversation with students, high school and middle as well. A lot of it is, the safety of how we maintain 7-8 in their culture and 9-12. And so, for example, in the morning, 7-8 students, we spend our morning in the new commons. So if you're on the bus, they know to head in and go right to the new commons, and families drop off at the New Commons entrance. So it's no different than on the bus essentially. So we work on our schedules. We collaborate with our shared staff so that when there's an assembly or something, we are making sure that things are covered and that and everything is, and our times aren't overlapping too much. There's a lot of just looking ahead and thinking of where could this go south and what can we do to offset that together. And Mary Eaton is kind of our big picture to make sure that those things are kind of managed ahead of time. So from the managerial side of things, I think we have a good flow with regard to that. School-wise, and from a student's perspective, I think this is a question that I have some presumptions I could make, but I'd want to talk with students. Both, I think we're at the point where any high schooler has only ever known what it's like to be in that building. So what have they seen? And then what are our current students saying? That have we problem solved things naturally? Have things gotten better? Or are there things that we still need to tackle from that lens?
What she said. Yeah, I think I wouldn't describe anything with the consolidation in 712 as challenging. I think that we've been really well organized. I think naturally our students are separated because we have different schedules. So the passing times are different. And obviously the lunches are different too. And a real advantage too is that, we can share staff. We have a couple, at least 2 or 3 teachers every year that teach middle school and high school. And we have different length schedules and things like that, but we still can figure it out. We work together. Okay, Kayla needs this teacher first and second, so I will schedule later in the day when we make the master schedule. What's really good too is our older students, we have many that are TAs for the middle school teachers, which I think is really neat. I think there's opportunities too in the past. We've had some homecoming assemblies and things like that where our 7th and 8th graders would actually come to the assembly and kind of see what our traditions are. I thought that was real positive. And again, what also I like is our 9-12 staff get to know our middle school kids before they even have them in class. And I think that's a real positive. But I don't really see challenges. I think we do a great job, and our building isn't perfect as far as separation, but again, our high school students know that they are not to walk through the middle school wing. That's not always 100%, but they know better, especially during lunch and things like that. So again, I don't see it as a challenge. I think it's a real positive.
As far as what I see is the culture of middle school and the high school. I think athletically, we try to make sure that there's a Cougar experience as well as a Falcon experience, and it's different. It's a middle school experience, and our conversations with our coaches are such that we want to make this a great middle school experience. And and what I see in the spirit, the hallway, the middle school hallway, they do a great job of decorating that. A lot of Cougar pride, a lot of Cougar energy. And so I think that even though within the building, there is definitely a Cougar pride and a Cougar spirit that can be delineated from the high school.
What's great too is that our staff, before the consolidation, we were at different buildings, but now our English teachers can meet 712. Our science teachers can meet 712. They're in the same building. And a lot of those conversations aren't formal, they're organic, and they just take place. And, they see each other, they talk with each other. So again, I think it really brings the school community together. So I think it's a great idea. And again, it's Dr. Moja shared this, but we have more than enough space right now. We really do.
K4 and 5, 6 comments?
Sure. I think that the 5th grade coming to our campus really makes a lot of sense. While we've made the 5, 6 period a day work, I think developmentally having 5th graders in a smaller, tight classroom setting may be more developmentally appropriate for them. I also think that we can still provide a modified movement with, if we had 3 5th grade teachers, maybe there would be 3 ways that the students could move through an ELA block, a math science block. I think there's all kinds of creative things we can do. Yeah, I'm excited about the opportunity and also excited about what we could do down at the South Campus. I think about the expansion of community partnership possibilities. We're already, like with the ALE, we're meeting with Mother Mentors and WIN and looking for opportunities for internships for students. And I just, the more we can bring our community in, I know we haven't decided on that, but that seems like a really wonderful approach to me.
Excuse me, I guess what I would say is the South Campus is a special place. And I've been there for 3 years now, and all the staff are so committed to the campus and the students that are being served in that campus right now. But when you look at the pros and the cons, as you would with any discussion like this, there's many pros and many cons. I think that developing a 612 culture at the secondary campus is going to be really important as we continue to have the enrollment changes that we do. And we've already talked about many of the structural changes that would be helpful. I think that same at the K-5, there's so many, for example, lunch. We walk up for lunch. We're using the same staff at the North Campus that we do for the South Campus. So that economy of scale wouldn't shift much, but it would certainly change some of the, traveling of the students between campuses and some of that environmental focus around supporting them social emotionally. And so you have a K-5 focus and a 612 focus. Those are very important. We also continue to have this early learning focus at the South Campus with ECAP and Mother Mentors, and we've had discussions about kindergarten. And so I think while this could be looked at as a negative thing of closing the campus, it could be a positive thing of other things that may be possible because of the changes. So from my perspective, I got a lot of teachers that are like, this is great. We've just developed this really core 5-6 culture for our kids at that age level. And the kids really respond well to that, but they will respond similarly in a K-5 environment. And hopefully in the 612, those other things will be more, it'll make more sense when the schedules are similar and they're in the same pathway. So with that said, I'm happy to answer any questions about what we're currently doing. But in this discussion, I think identifying safety as a priority is something we need to talk about. I think it's going to be part of the bond proposal. There's safety enhancements that'll need to be made at the South Campus as we continue to have these discussions around safety. And the other two campuses have different points of entry, different things that already lend themselves to some of those improvements. I'm not saying, and so having that as part of the discussion is also important. We may need to spend money through a bond proposal to change and make changes that would address those areas. So just having that as part of the conversation is really important.
If we just take a look at that, what Jeff is referring to, if I can get this to respond. If we look at the South Campus, there are many doors that open to the outside. And so Jeff has had to do extraordinary things to make sure that those doors remain locked and that students are in there safely. So yes, when we've been talking about the bond proposal in the South Campus, we have talked about extending a perimeter so that it was a safer building. We also know that that particular campus is our highest utility cost, second only to the 612 campus. So again, if you think about the fact that there are true grade levels there and it's the second highest cost in utilities, it's something to consider. So that's why we're looking at this. And, I appreciate the fact that Jeff has done a great job at making it a 5-6 campus with, Cougar pride and, keeping the facility safe. It's really about economy of scale and among other things. So I think.
Yeah, I will say that just to put a positive slant at, the teachers love having the extra space because literally we're using a campus that's designed for over 500 kids with 150. So, I mean, at some point That's a general positive, but it doesn't make sense in the long run. And so that like you mentioned about the K4 spreading into other rooms, and I know that's happened at 712 as well. It's just that economy is so important.
It is. And if we look at the K4 campus and know how many vacant rooms there are, plus how many rooms could be vacant, it kind of stopped making sense to keep 3 facilities. So I'm going to stop talking and just, where does the board want to go? What questions does everyone have? And
Speaking as a student who spent time at all 3 of the campuses, something I really enjoyed that I'm worried we're going to miss if we transition to 612 and K through 5 is transition and change in general. Just the feeling of being able to move campuses, I think adds a lot to student culture, and you kind of feel like you have like a new slate and a new beginning. And I think it could be very tiring and boring for students spending 7 years at the exact same campus, especially starting with the exact same people, since we don't have a bunch of new students coming in and out. You see, if you look at schools on the other side with much bigger student populations, you have them kind of like melting together into a high school coming from different areas. So I think it's really important to make sure that we're still maintaining change and a transformation from middle school to high school. So making sure we kind of look at this as 6 through 8 and 9 through 12 separate, but on the same campus, and maintaining that middle school culture so they can really feel that transition moving from 8th grade into 9th grade. And as a 5th grader, I didn't experience the 6-period schedule, but I think I can't speak for all the 5th graders in our district, but it's something I would enjoy, would be able to have a 6-period schedule. So even if we're unable to maintain a 6-period schedule, having maybe more electives and more movement throughout the building, throughout the day, instead of just staying in one classroom.
I kind of like to add to what Audrey said, but also, so I came into the school at 7th grade, which was at the high school. And one thing that I think was really important for me, and I've seen it with other students, is being able to go in like from a very small private school to a big building, but kind of condensed, to kind of get used to what the high school was like. And having that experience in middle school of kind of being in the same building, but also having your own like section in that building, I think was really important for me. And I've seen that in other students also. And with the 5th graders and the 6-period schedule, the ones I've talked to, the few 5th graders that I've been able to have conversations with, I think they like the 6-period schedule because they like feeling older. But if it doesn't make sense for them developmentally, then we need to focus on developmentally before we can go with they want to feel older.
Well, and as someone who is married to someone who was a 5th grade teacher until last year, there is a midpoint at which Mr. Richards was referring to is at Coopville, for instance, they are departmentalized. So they have a homeroom, but then one teacher is ELA, English Language Arts, one is math, and one is science. So they do still get to rotate classrooms to get to these different teachers, but the majority of the time is spent in homeroom. So you get a midpoint between a 6-period day and a single homeroom day, which is single homeroom outside of specialists day, which I think is a great midpoint. And she thought that the students really enjoyed that opportunity to move now and then to get like sort of getting a jump on being a middle schooler. I've got some other things, but I want to open it up to make sure other board members.
I think the plan that you have mapped out makes sense. Some pieces in having seen other districts do a similar move, pieces that I would just caution you to plan for would be if you do go 6-12, I would highly, highly, highly encourage you to have the same bell schedule, 6 through 12, because while your gen ed teachers will be able to kind of work those scheduling pieces out, your special services, your EL, your high cap, your SPED teachers, you will run into some really big scheduling conflicts on those areas, especially if they have to float between campuses, which might be the case with like an EL support or something like that. The other part that you'll find is you'll either have overload issues with teachers, or you will have teachers with too much gap times if they're not on similar schedules. So whatever that looks like. I would also, if we move in this direction, want to see the bond really then prioritize how to create separation between the middle school and the high school. And I'm sure that there are examples of campuses that we could look at where there are shared common spaces, but there's clear delineation, separate entrances, so that it can honor the experiences of those students. I think in terms of the K-5, that's a pretty typical model. And so I don't have many pieces there, but I do think in terms of helping staff be where they need to be, I think the other place that you may have potential savings would be around classified staff. So paraeducators being able to work both middle school and high school if they're on the same campus, or consolidating down to the north and the south campus. And it might actually, you might be able to utilize people differently in those capacities. So I think that you might see more classified savings than you think you might.
Thank you. I've parented students. I've parented my own children through some of these transitions. I've had a daughter who was one of the last 8th graders at the Langley Middle School. And I've also had a daughter who's experienced the current schedule throughout her education. And generally, I'm really receptive to this plan. I think it makes a lot of sense, both from the perspective of cost and efficiencies, and also from the perspective of student experience. A couple of questions that arise for me. What improvements or maintenance might be needed and supported through the bond process at South Campus to maintain it as a safe and healthy space for community partnership work? And can we understand some of the data around vacancy rates or occupancy rates at the community center? And whether a new building that is, or I should say, a new focus for one of our buildings towards community partnerships and rentals, whether it might be in competition with or in support of what we're already doing with the community center. And then I'm also really interested in just nipping that covered walkway in the bud if we're going in this direction, if we don't have students traveling by foot between South and North Campus.
So, thank you. Somehow, and maybe I'm being a little bit too cut and dried. Somehow I want us to focus, and mostly we are, focus on what we can do for our students if we do this, and then switch focus to those very issues. How do we improve the sites with the bond if we do this? And how do we rent? Can we rent? What does it look like? I guess I'm hoping that we can answer the board's question about the student use early, so that that decision, if the board so chooses, can be made. And then all of the other pieces could fall into place. And if we found ourselves in April or May saying, oh, well, we didn't think about all of these things, we would still have room, right? But if we process the move for too long, then we lose the planning of what does the move look like. So, and I know if these are just preliminary questions, I'm not trying to stop conversation. I'm just trying to give you a sense of where I'm thinking. So.
Yeah, I did want to focus discussion on this plan rather than, and then the second half of this meeting, talk about what it could mean for the district beyond that. So those are definitely things that we should talk about. I'd like to focus, if we can, on positives and negatives of the campus shift first, and then other things that might become attendant to that, like.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I this might fall into the other things bucket, but I just also hope that there's adequate outreach to the community to do some community listening prior to making a decision on this subject.
That's actually why we have the community meeting. I'm
Next
looking
week.
right up at the camera now. Community meeting next Wednesday
Mhm.
to discuss this very thing and to get ideas from the community and to talk about this plan and discuss the positives and the
Right.
negatives. And
And basically, we have, though the board hasn't formally had this discussion like this, I did alert the board to this concept last spring. Staff is certainly aware of the thinking. Community members have contacted me. So far, it's been only about logistics questions, not about should we do it or should we not do it. So I think that next week, we also see if there's some more people with some more concerns around it. It's certainly not as fraught as when we had to talk about the Langley Middle School process.
I want to recognize that there were some additional community issues around the Langley Middle School, because that was also the Langley High School that a number of people in the community graduated from. I mean, I went to the South, what is now the South Campus, first grade through third grade, first and second grade, and then came here afterwards. But that still just doesn't have the same tie as your alma mater. So I do hope that there's a little less tension there with this campus as opposed to with the South Campus as opposed to the Langley Middle School campus.
First off, Dr. Moshe, I want to thank you for bringing this idea and having the, I don't know, the out of the box thinking instead of just business as usual. I think that is such a good example for us all for seeing problems and proposing solutions to them, even if it means, getting out of our comfort zone. And just the fact that we can think a year ahead is also just a testament to how smoothly the district is running. Knock on wood that it continues that way, but we're not putting out fires right now, so we can talk about 23, 24. So I really appreciate that. I'd love to hear from anybody who, I wasn't here when we did our last building shuffle. And so I'd love to hear from folks. What did we learn? What were some of the unanticipated bumps in the road so that we can do this, if we do move forward with this, so that we could do this one even more smoothly?
I can tell you that one of the biggest obstacles in that move was the decision was made in April for the following September. And that really made things very difficult. It was, which is why I think we'd start early. And as Brooke pointed out, it was also very different time, very different feelings around the loss versus and it was a very big change. To put 7th and 8th grade at that 712 campus, there was a lot of talk then about why can't we do 6, 7, 8 at this campus, and why can't we, make that change. We simply didn't have enough space then, and now we do. And we didn't have enough space at the K-5 to stay the way we were because of the changes that we were making. So this is an evolution that I think will continue until we get to about 950 students. I think we're going to be about the same size as Coopville, which I believe is a K-5, 612, is it not?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think we're experiencing that. So yeah, I want to have those discussions as well. We certainly, we dealt with some very high emotions. A lot of talk about identity, about making sure that the middle school felt like a middle school. It took some time to get there. I think that we are finally in a place where students are recognized, and our students can hopefully help answer that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think the 6 or the 7, 8 feels like a middle school, and the 9, 12 still feels like a high school. I think a 6, 7, 8 would make it even stronger.
I think I see a lot of possibility. And if we could go back to the South Campus map, we've been having this conversation about that 0 to 5 bucket, right? We already have mother mentors there. We already have ECAP there. And we know that there are childcare facilities at the community center and it's expanding, right? This is an opportunity to look at, does this become not necessarily South Whitby School District, but maybe something of an early learning campus? And what resources, what things could we put in place there that would help families navigate finding services for that range? And would that, in addition, maintain or increase the enrollment coming up to kindergarten?
So
I know I'm going to the second half of the
and
meeting.
that's fine.
I know.
If that's
I
where
know.
you, as a board, want to go, I don't want to stop your conversation about that. But all of those things are possible. Again, I also don't want to lose sight of, could it be a multi-use facility with some housing in there too? I'm just really trying hard to focus on students and the movement of students and staff, and then go into, okay, because it's going to be, it took a lot of effort, and it took Gail Lavasser at least a year to get our community center on its feet. So I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we have program that I want us to focus on, and then potential for the community use. But all of those things are happening at the same time. Mother Mentors wants more space. ECAP wants to expand. People are clamoring for early childhood, even though the population is lower. We have people who need childcare and early childhood. We have people who need housing. We have lots of interest. I'm just trying to slowly go through this process.
And I guess my intention was to say that one could see, well, we're vacating a building, and I think it's more, I still see it as student focused. It's just changing what is the purpose, and that we could actually do more to serve our students by eliminating kind of the expansion that we've taken, right? We don't need 2 classrooms. We don't need those pieces. And so we could actually serve students better.
That's
by
absolutely true.
consolidating.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cleaning and utilities and all of that alone. So yeah, it does allow us to add. You have your hand up, John?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just piggybacking on kind of what Andrea was saying is, we talk about opportunities for academic enhancement, enrichment, but also we need to think about, student remediation, intervention, student support. And, Andrea, I think you know this well too, is that we have outside agencies that come to the 712 that are inherent to 712, such as our advocates from ESD, our people from the county. We have Compass Health person that comes in. We have a full-time McKinney-Vento liaison. So I think, in a system, if it's a little larger, we have even more robust student support and family support. So I think that's another real positive thing.
I did want to note for those on the Zoom, we've got one comment in here, but I do not have a name and location associated with it. If you could enter that in, your name and just the general community that you live in, just so we can get that on the record for comments, and I'll read it as soon as we have that. And if that could come in with any other comments, we'd love to hear from community members on Zoom or in person. I did want to touch base with something Dr. Fankhauser said about safety and the acknowledgement that you and your staff have done a ton of really hard and good work on securing that South Campus. But after the Uvalde, I felt comfortable bringing my daughter here because I knew that there was a single point of entry in the school. And that's like, I know that there are other parents who felt the same way, that having those restricted entrances really was good for peace of mind in the community. And so if we could get all of our students at 2 campuses that have that single point of entry, I think that would be really, really good for the mental health of our students and families. And Oh, did you want to?
I would just add that to Andrea's point and to your point, that if we were to cross develop or change the focus to some early childhood, something or another, whatever that might look like, or whatever the board and the community wants to do, we would then have to consider the facility upgrades that may be required to have that be a multi-use, whether it's housing, whether it's early child, whatever it is. And that's going to be then that secondary conversation about the bond proposal.
Yes,
Which
absolutely.
may or may not be in this bond, right?
Right.
Doesn't have to be what we do to upgrade the, sorry, it doesn't have to be what we do in this bond to upgrade the secondary campus and the North Campus. We could take a little more time. There's nothing to say that you can't do a bond now and then another bond in a year for a different opportunity. So just again, food for thought. But yeah, there would be upgrades needed not quite as urgently in that campus, at that campus.
I'm just reflecting on student experiences and how in a smaller district, there are less opportunities for forming friendships, just fewer human beings with whom to form a friendship. And there's something nice about the idea of having an extra grade level to engage with at the middle school and an extra grade level to engage with at the elementary school. There is something about having just 2 grade levels in 5-6 and just 2 grade levels in 7-8 that just constrains the number of people available with whom to connect. And I see the opportunity for students to have more friendships and stronger friendships with the extended duration of a stay on any given campus.
I think it's a cultural thing, and Audrey talked about it. Well, both of our students did. I think we have to create culture, right? If it's a 6, 7, 8 culture, a 9, 12 culture, a K-5 culture, students need to have a sense of belonging.
And I think on top of creating culture, there has to be like a clear divide between, well, not a divide, but like the middle school, I think really needs to have their own lunch, their own passing period where it gets hard with the different bell schedules. But I think as students, having that is really important. So you're not like as a 7th grader or a 6th grader walking through the halls, going from English to science, where you have to pass through the high school sections, mixing with 12th graders that when you're 10, 11, 17, 18-year-olds are like giants to you. You get scared when you see them. And I think having that divide is really important for just everyone's kind of anxiety and mental security, I guess.
That's kind of the lens that, as I'm thinking of, as we move forward with this, of an 11-year-old and 18-year-old are in very different places in their life, right? So as in those less structured times, we work to offset that schedule, that lunch is still 6 through 8. And there's still opportunity. The first day of school last year, I kind of laughed. A kid came up to me and said, "When's recess?" I was like, "What are you talking?" But I'm realizing at this age that we needed to provide opportunities for outlets for movement. And our staff is really cognizant of that as well. So we have opportunities for that in intramurals, and we go outside and it looks like a middle school recess because we have the facilities to provide them that opportunity. They're playing Foursquare, they're playing basketball, and that's there. I had students in today getting ready for the school year, and a lot of the things that I perceive as challenges, they either don't perceive at all or see it as an opportunity. They were looking at how we make our space really welcoming for all new Cougars, all Cougars. And so the conversation was just driven toward that. It wasn't, how do we make sure that this is, our world? They perceive that as this is the middle school world, and let's enhance it and bring in belongingness. And I think our staff does a really good job of helping our students learn the procedures of, this is how you go from your English class through the courtyard down to science. So we are not interrupting English, and we're not walking past a class of 18-year-olds having a different dialogue than what would be appropriate to a 12-year-old. So we really work to be cognizant of that and reinforce that all year long. If you've ever run into a teacher, if you were a high schooler and we booted you out gently to remind you that this is a space for middle schoolers, it's something we try to be cognizant of. That I think as adults, we bring the anxiety, and the students show up, and it's things that we created in our minds that often don't actually come to fruition. So I think that's part of why I see this move as being more fluid, that all the anxiety we had before, we didn't know. We've seen it. Now we just we're kind of like, let's get more proactive. And I think if we do this, Susie, like our orientations are going to look a lot different. I'm going to be down there earlier talking to 5th and 6th graders about our campus and what it looks like. So knowing that we get a jump start on it, that orientation is going to look different because we're bringing 2 groups in and helping them to kind of have that big move.
I just want to add that I want to thank our staff, both the middle school staff and the South Campus staff. And Mrs. Phillips, of course, has put in the place this advisory model that we started last year that starts at the 5th grade level and goes all the way to the 8th grade level. And it's going to be a consistent again this year. So I think that's going to be another piece that's going to help with that social emotional growth over the course of those 4 grade levels.
That actually fits in really well with my next question, which was again for you, Dr. Fankhauser, of is there anything that you see as in danger of being lost that is unique to the 5-6 that that brings a concern about this proposal for you? I know that it's its own campus with its own culture, but what are some things that having just 5-6 together is really great for that we wouldn't have if we split them into 2 different campuses?
Question, Director Williver. The question I would say is, there's a big difference between a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old, but there's also a big difference between a 10-year-old and an 11-year-old. And this growth seems to happen between 5th and 6th grade. I used to teach at the middle school level mostly. We'd have these 6th graders that would come in and you'd just think that they were basically in 3rd grade, and then they'd leave as 8th graders and they were starting out on the basketball team, so you wonder if they're going to need a parking spot in 8th grade. And the question that happens with all of these developmental changes with kids is trying to find staff that cares about them, directly impacts their developmental spot in life. And sure, there's going to be something that's going to be potentially lost with this intense focus on 5th and 6th graders. But that's all in how we do it and how we change it. And whether there's this unique identity right now for 5th and 6th graders, there'll be a unique identity for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders as there was before. And these 5th graders that potentially will just stay there another year, they won't know the difference. So I love the little school. It's a special place. And you talk to any one of our staff and they just say, there's something unique about it and it's special. But we are at where we're at. And so we're all professionals. We're trying to figure out how to make the right decisions as a team to follow the guidance of you guys to see where we're going to go.
And so I used to teach middle school, and that was my little world. I taught high school for a while and discovered middle school, never went back. When I was in Kent, I was there when their junior highs were 7 and 8. And I came in the year that they introduced 6th graders. And so I remember going through that transition, and Ms. Phillips, you hit the nail on the head. The parents were the ones who were anxious about the change. The 6th graders showed up when they were 6th graders. And when I went to Lake Washington, I somehow managed to stumble into another transition where I walked in my first year there, I had 7, 8, 9. And then what we did was the year after we had 6th graders come and the 9th graders went to the high school. And it was, again, different demographics, different school districts, different things, same kids showed up. And 6th graders work really well with 7th and 8th graders. It's a good fit for them. 5th graders work really well with 3rd and 4th graders, and it's a good fit for them. And so there isn't some of the conversations that we would have in Lake Washington, especially around like moving 9th graders to the high school, was, are they ready for it? And then the flip side was, well, they're earning high school credit and they're in a middle school. And so like, what are they losing by not being at the high school, right? That conversation doesn't really exist for the 5th and 6th grade levels. You don't have high school credits on the line. You don't have developmentally, they're in this nice little sweet spot where they can kind of go either way. And so having gone through 2 of those transitions, I think it is not as intense as the previous transition that we made.
A really beautiful reciprocal relationship we have also, if you've been in a middle school classroom, we have peer tutors. And so while they're seeing the model of great math, but they're also really seeing the skill set and the responsibilities of a high schooler. And in turn, those teachers, and they might be great math students, or they might just be kids who that teacher had a connection with, and we needed to foster that longer, or for whatever reason. And we're giving that student the opportunity to also see themselves in a leadership role and mentor kids and show a lot of maturity. And this is what it looks like for you as you transition to high school, but that kid's also learning some really great skills while they're in there as well. So that's been a really natural opportunity that we're hoping to continue to expand upon. And so just continue that reciprocity for both growing our high school students, but also our middle school kids, seeing what some of those skills look like, and then having more mentorship beyond just staff members.
One huge benefit I see for 6th graders, if we transition to 6 through 12, is having 6th graders involved in athletics and other extracurriculars. I actually sat down with a few 6th graders this year in Mr. Logostad, and they're really disappointed that they weren't able to participate in sports because of the campus difference. So now being able to participate in athletics, I think will add also to kind of like the middle school culture of having all the grade levels there. But then again, I also want to make sure that we're giving 5th graders a slightly different experience than what they experienced in K through 4, and that they have more, I guess, discuss like departmentalism and having like either math and science together and ELA and history, and just being able to feel like a change between classrooms. It kind of preps them for the 6th to 8th grade experience at the high school.
Also, among the list of things for the district to consider if we move through this is like the impact on the more vulnerable populations, English language learners, special ed students. So I just, I trust that you all will take those folks into account.
Yeah, and Director Greenhorn, what we said, and Dr. Down said it as well, having the ability, what student rep Gamerick said, is that right? Is having that ability to take a kid that needs advanced math and put them in, Mr. Patton brought it up earlier today, he was like, you're gonna give them algebra 1, whereas a challenge, some are ready for that. And having that capability across grade levels is something we don't currently have at the 5th and 6th grade. For EL, we currently have one specialist that serves the entire district. And so having just 2 places to go rather than 3 is going to allow that teacher to get to more places and support students better. When it comes to special education, we have some economies of scale that will happen with this change that occur, because you can have, just like you have with, and you brought it up, academic focus, where you might want to have 5th grade teachers rotate and only one teaches specializes in math and one in ELA. Same with special ed. You can share that expertise between the different special ed teachers and therefore be able to differentiate design instruction at a more universal rate for all the kids, not just the special ed kids, but all the students, and try to figure out how to just use the resources we do have more effectively.
Thank you all for weighing in on this and having this discussion. I'd like to, with the approval of the board, direct our conversation to some of the other alternative, additional things that we could get out of this or consider following this, like the early childhood focus that you were talking about. We will have that community meeting next Wednesday as an opportunity to discuss with the community this idea. And then we will have public comment before any vote happens at our business meeting 2 weeks from now. So we will have plenty of time to communicate with the community and hear from the community about these ideas before we make any decision. And so we will have the opportunity to continue to discuss that at this community meeting and during debate if we want to at the business meeting. So I don't want to see this as cutting off conversation for good and having to decide on what we've talked about now, but shifting focus to talk about some of the other things that might come with this. Dr. Moshe mentioned a later start time for high schoolers. That's something that I've actually had, I believe, 5 students reach out to me in the last year through various methods, either talking to me during a campus visit or emailing me or actually sending me a letter about this. And so I think that would be, and studies have shown that a later start date for high schoolers in particular is so beneficial for social emotional health, for mental health, for academic health, all of these, for physical health, all of these things, that I think it would be a wonderful opportunity, whether or not we do this consolidation, to get that single bus route if we think it's suitable to try to provide that. I do want to note, I do have a comment here from Linda Ade Ritter, but I do not have a location from you, Ms. Ritter. If you could type into the Q&A your location, just Clinton, Friedland, Langley, Oak Harbor, wherever you're at, I'm happy to read the comment, but we need that for our records. So sound like there's later start date. Just since we're talking about strategic issues, I wanted to bring up the idea of year-round school, not necessarily to vote on it or do it in 2 years, but just to think about it, to consider it.
There's an iGrant out there for if you consider the thought of year-round school, you can get like 75K. So thank you for saying that, Brooke. And all you have to do is just think about it. You don't have to do it. You don't have to do anything. You just have to think about it. And I can get you the details if you want that.
Yeah, because I've been thinking about it for a couple of months at least. So let's talk about that. Now that I have the comment, this feeds well into what we're talking about now. Linda Otteritter in Clinton says, mother mentors would need considerable planning time should we be asked to vacate our rental space in 2023. Mother mentors would prefer to rent additional space. Our ideal would be to rent all of the CA, C1, C5, and C6 spaces. So that entire block down there. Opening additional spaces for other programs and housing would bring richness to what would be a center for children and families. We would be very excited about this. Maybe a childcare program could be located on this campus too. There is need for this. Thank you, Ms. Ritter, for chiming in on that. Yeah, it's absolutely, as Andrea was talking about, something we should be looking into, I think.
Director Williford, just a side note, please welcome Ms. Ritter aboard. She's taking over Mother Mentors from Kate McVeigh, who is retired after many years of great service. So welcome her to the team.
Thank you, Dr. Frankhauser, and welcome. Any other thoughts, commentaries on things we should be discussing strategically with or without this movement? Things that we could gain if we consolidate at the South Campus? Should we get into housing, childcare, etc.?
Is the community center full? Are all the rooms rented out?
I'll have an answer for that in a minute.
Okay.
Gail's actually on, so I'm sure she will chime in and let me know what the rental rate is there.
Because I feel like, Gail, not to put too much work on your plate, but there was a huge need for that community center. And there are a huge amount of services and supports of a variety of options. And I know that there is a focus on how you become a part of the community center. Could one of the things we consider is just expanding the community center to include a different campus, and then maybe natural groupings or natural pieces could come out of that where people, rent rooms next to other organizations. Or
So
things
Gail
like
says
that.
it's full, but there may be some movement within the next few months, so it's
Okay.
unclear. But you're talking about coordinating rentals.
Just
through-
expanding the community center.
Well, again, yes, I'm sure we could expand the opportunities for people to rent space. Again, I'm just curious about what would happen if we looked around about and talked about early childhood, if we talked about housing, if we talked about opportunities, if there would be some folks that step forward. The community center does offer supports. They also have tenants in there that are, offer staff business, even though they offer support. So it depends
And-
on what we're looking to do.
And part of that, the reason I went down that road was because, if we want to explore housing, right? Like I'm open to exploring housing. I have no qualms about that. But it might make sense, like if we look at both buildings, if we look at both organization or entities, we might see natural groupings where housing makes more sense. And so like maybe if we move and we could address community concerns by looking at it that way, because I could anticipate one concern that might be is, do we want people living and tenants living
Right.
that close to a school
Well,
campus where we
exactly.
could move some of the people down from the community center and then have housing in a different location that might alleviate some community concerns or something along those lines.
Exactly. A part of the conversation for next week, the expanded conversation is, what is the school district's footprint and how do you want to use space? And, I can bring that up now if you want me to, or we can save it till next week, but it's got all of the land that the district owns, the 40 vacant acres, the land in Langley, the outdoor classroom, all of that should be part of at least the thinking around where are we going. But you're right, people may feel uncomfortable if there's housing near that close to a school or not. I don't know. The city of Langley would need to be part of the conversation. And I know there's still some interest in what are we doing with the proposal around the fairgrounds, expanding the worker housing. So I think, again, these are bigger conversations that involve more of our community, which is why I separated them from this strictly what are we wanting to do for our students, because I think we're going to get a lot of input on what we should be doing around this or that regarding the use of district land.
Yeah, I had a similar line of thought to Director Downs, which is that, given the two buildings, the current community center and a potentially empty South Campus, and the safety concerns at the South Campus, should it be used for student type activities, there's probably an opportunity to shuffle student type activities where safety is a greater concern into the community center, which as a former school building has these easier ability to have a security envelope, and then more community driven adult, I guess, type uses into the South Campus where security is less of a concern.
Well, and if there's smaller groups at the South Campus, security is less of a concern. For instance, if Mother Mentors took over that entire block, they could have one entrance into that block, and then they would just have one entrance. I did have a correction here from Dr. Ritter, that she is one of the founders of MMWI and the board president, not the director. But
Welcome again and thank you.
I really feel excited about the expansive possibilities if we were to first face the decision point around, is this the right direction for our students? With that decision made, if we make the decision to make this shift to a K-5, 612 or 6-8 and 912 program, then I really like the idea that we have a longer runway for making best use of facilities in partnership with community, because there is work to be done as a community that isn't necessarily the district's work to do, but where the district can be a great partner. And addressing community issues in a holistic way, collaboratively, and with multiple entities is just such a great way to transform systems. And we do have symptoms of greater community ills like a housing shortage that are directly affecting our ability to educate students and do our work. So I'm just excited about giving ourselves a longer runway to really form the partnerships that will sustain the most healthful manifestation of future possibility. And I see the key decision point being, how do we serve our students best in 2023, 2024, being a prequel to those expansive conversations.
Exactly. And I think that the principals and staff with student input can make decisions around how to use the K-5 campus, the 612 campus in the best way for students. Of course, community will have input, but that work then is going on while we can do other work as well on the outside. That's why I kind of laid out this timeline thinking this might be helpful to look at, that next week we discuss the bigger picture, short-term, long-term with the community. Hopefully the board at least makes a decision on the 24th, whatever that decision is. Then the principals and staff plan, the bond team has a direction, and then we continue those other conversations on with our community on how do we want to help our community go forward. And again, the city of Langley basically has zoning control over that middle school campus, which is a community center, but still zoned educational facility. So that's a piece of the puzzle. The county has the control over the zoning for every other facility that the district owns, the 40 vacant acres that are treed, the 7 vacant acres that are treed, and each of the school sites, as well as the outdoor classroom. So a lot of land to consider.
Well, and I know that the city of Langley in particular is very, very, very interested in the housing crisis.
They are, and I've participated in at least one conversation with the planning group over there. Again, I hesitate to have conversation around parking when the conversation's bigger than that. So, but again, these are the board's decisions. One of the things that does have to happen if we make this decision is we have to, and it's not urgent, we have to do it by June. So again, it's very much forethought. We have to register our school entities at the state level so that they know what we're using, and it requires board action. I can't, as a superintendent, I can't decide entities. You have to decide where K-5, 612 with the 6-8 in, it would be its own entity, 6-8, like it is now. It would be K-5, 6-8, 9-12, and then the 6-12 would be on a single campus if that's what you do. So just so that you know where our thinking is.
And I do want to keep in mind one additional constituency besides staff and community, which is students. And I know that we're going to sit down and talk about how to get word out to students to try to get their input at the community meeting. So I'm very excited to hopefully get hear from additional students as well.
Absolutely. I definitely think it's important before making a decision, we hear how it will impact students, especially from younger students who will have to go through the 6 through 8 instead of, just like me, who's going to graduate in a little over a year or 2 years. And I also think when looking at what we use our facilities for, such as the community center and the South Campus, is looking how it can support student enrollment. Especially, we can see a link between the housing shortage and declining enrollment. So finding a way that we can maintain our student enrollment by using our own facilities, and even support such as having like a preschool or mother mentors, just finding ways we can support our families to keep families in our district.
Well, and the other part of that is making sure that if the housing issue does get reversed, we can scale up again, which would be well in the future, I assume, but it's something that I know that was in the planning for the move away from the community center and would stay top of mind in any plan to consolidate further.
In 2 facilities, if we did go to 2 facilities, we'd still have tremendous capacity. That secondary campus was built for 750 students, and we still wouldn't meet that next year. In 23. So we have capacity. Again, we've moved into all of our spaces.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. One of the possible efficiencies that this would afford us is also just reducing our carbon footprint as a district. Or if we sustain our carbon footprint, having the carbon footprint serve more members of our community in more ways. And I really love the idea of maximizing efficiencies, both monetarily and in terms of energy usage. So that touching on the utility bill at South Campus, it isn't just a dollar impact, it's also a climate impact. And I know that we have students who really have pushed for a more climate responsible district and a more climate responsible education. And so I think it's in line with our vision of engaged global leaders to think along those lines.
Dr. Moshe, looking at your timeline, I'm wondering if we could entertain a conversation of moving the determination to September. The reason being, if we have one community conversation August 17th, then we're putting it right during the start of school. And so I think before people have come back and wanting to give people enough time to feel included in the conversation, I think would help later on should we move in this direction.
I would add that an additional advantage of that is that perhaps notice could be sent home with students early in the first week of school, especially students in the grade levels that would be immediately impacted, so that those parents can be explicitly invited to some kind of community forum or conversation that might follow August 24th.
I think that all seems very reasonable. My question then is, do we want to postpone the planned one or have this one and an additional one?
No, I think you do August 17th as planned. That gives people a chance to come ask questions. It would then leave an August board meeting where we might hear some public comment, because we're also recognizing that this is community input. And it would, then we would have one other workshop where we could maybe, depending on the response we see, if we feel needed, we could add that to a workshop agenda to continue a conversation. And then, but what I would worry about is the perception of if we do this before school even starts, and you have somebody who's on vacation because it's August and their kids aren't back in school yet, that they may not feel invited to the table.
I think that's a very well taken point.
Yeah, I agree with that. Assuming that if we vote on this in the September board meeting and we vote yes, we will have lost a month to execute on the plan. So I just want to make sure that we can still do it given one less month for planning.
Check. I think, I'm not speaking for Kayla, but I think we've already had discussions, and I don't think that we would feel a pressure with a timeline from our end about getting it done, a plan. But again, I'm not speaking for Kayla.
I agree. I don't want it to feel like it's coming from us and then we gather feedback after. I'd rather make sure there's blind spots I'm not seeing. I haven't really talked to a lot of students about it. So I think it would be worth our time to give it the extra month to really hear and see things that maybe we just have don't have a lens of yet.
I would add also, if you do delay, that the week of the 19th, which is after the board workshop, that week is where all the open houses are falling at all the buildings. So parents are going to have a lack of capacity to participate in multiple things that week. So you might consider the board workshop week.
yeah, I think families would feel better having a little more time. Like they're having the opportunity to be heard.
I think it's fine in terms of timeline. We do the August 17th. I can talk about it again on the 24th, and then the board can workshop it on the 10th of September and then make a decision at the end of September. That's fine. As John said, we're already in conversations with staff because it seems like a logical move, but certainly getting more feedback, if there is any more feedback.
Could we utilize the 10th to prioritize student input for the workshop? And so, you know, parents can have an opportunity on the 17th. They can always do public comment, but maybe the 10th is focused on student.
That would give students the time because they actually come back to school on the 31st. So they'll have had a couple weeks of school. Would
think-
that make more sense for you?
I think that definitely would, and also advertising it at the schools and talking to students so they really know this is the time for them to voice their opinions would be really crucial and important.
And just to keep the record straight, I think we're talking about September 14th as a school board workshop night.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I probably have
And
the wrong date.
I
Yep.
love the
And then
idea
the
that-
28th would be a vote night.
Yes, and we could explicitly invite parents and guardians and students to join us on that workshop evening on this topic.
We can put it in the Navigator.
Parent Square, yeah. And yeah, especially for the 5-6 students, I think that'd be incredibly important to get direct communication with them. I think it's fantastic. I love more opportunities for community engagement. So I think that's a great idea.
And I just, to clarify, Brooke, it's community input, right? We are looking at the realities and we want to take input in. But I think that it's good to have some time to breathe and get that.
Yeah,
it's-
hear opinions, hear ideas, hear concerns. Yes.
Yes, it's the board's decision is what you're saying. Yes, it's for the board to deliberate on and decide. I don't have a problem with the additional month and making sure that folks are aware of the decision making. As I said, I think I'm hearing it bubbling up. So I think people know. I just don't think there's a big concern, right? Because it just makes logical sense. So, but yeah, no problem.
And we can be open to being surprised by the concerns that arise through this process. You know, I'll be really interested not only to hear affirmation around the way we're leaning, but also perhaps perspectives that shift our opinion.
Any other comments, questions, thoughts? Okay, then with that, I will declare. Go
I
ahead.
have, could you please, you brought a slightly different topic in and it just kind of floated away, which was year-round school. And I don't want to start an entirely new full-fledged discussion, but maybe at least to plant the seed, if you could perhaps summarize in one paragraph what that would look like, and then we can, you know, give it the time and space it needs as a discussion in a future workshop.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm a nerd. I took notes. I have some things that I looked up about pros and cons, about different ways to do it. And the educators in the room would certainly know more than me, but this is just what I've done with my research. So I welcome additional input. So it's still 180 days of school in a year-round school. It just breaks up summer break into smaller breaks scattered throughout the year. There's three main ways of doing it. A 45-15, which has 45 days of school, followed by an additional 3 weeks of vacation, and then a 45 days of school, 15 weeks of vacation. So that has 4 blocks through the year. Then there's the 60-20, which 60 days on, 20 days off, gives you 3 blocks of learning. And then there's a 90-30 that has 2 blocks of learning, each separated by a 30-day break. And there are pros and cons to this. In some, for instance, one of the pros is more consistent support for students experiencing homelessness or poverty, because there isn't that 3-month gap where they don't have school services or don't have as much access to school services. It's much easier to provide bridge services for 15 days or 20 days or 30 days than for 3 months. It prevents the expanding achievement gap. I know that I'm working through my daughter's summer assignments with her, but it's really hard to maintain the level of engagement that you had and understanding that you had at the end of the year compared to the beginning of the year. Reduces review time at the beginning of the year for teachers. Provides intervention time between blocks. You can use some of those breaks to provide necessary intervention for students who might need a little additional assistance or have enrichment opportunities. For younger grades, it's year-round childcare. You don't have to find childcare for working guardians during the summer. And there are multiple smaller vacation times. Most people don't take a 3-month vacation during the summer. They take a smaller vacation within that, and this would provide multiple times throughout the year to do that. But there are downsides too. There's no big summer release. You can't go, I made it to summer. I'm done for 3 months, which is a huge mental health benefit to be able to do that. Explaining class rules and priorities at the beginning of every year provides social emotional learning practice at getting used to new things. So if you remove that, yes, you have more time for instruction, but you don't have that preparation for change. There's less access to summer camps or sports teams. There are year-round maintenance and supply costs. It's harder to have a summer job as a team. You can only have it for those short breaks. Yeah, those are the ones that I found. I know that there are more pros and cons.
I think what I would recommend is we take one step at a time. I think we're talking about a really big change in terms of consolidating a building. It would also impact potentially start times. It would impact bell schedules. Those are a lot of changes to ask buildings to navigate. And I think that should we look at that consideration at some point in the future, I would hope that we would do that in a research-based manner, that we would pull committees together. We would clearly have to have union buy-in. There would be several steps. And so I would like to entertain this conversation of, do we close a campus? Do we consolidate start times? Do we consolidate bus routes and tackle that first?
Oh, absolutely. No, this was just, while we're talking strategically about the school district, this is something that might be of consideration later in the future. I absolutely agree that focus on the immediate.
Respectfully, Director Williford, my fear would be that we have community members who may be hearing this for the very first time. And what they may be hearing is that we are doing closing campuses, doing year-round school, changing start times, and that can raise people's anxiety levels and turn off their prefrontal cortexes, and they don't necessarily hear that piece. So I would challenge us to stick to the task at hand and to look at keeping the communication as clear as possible and introduce ideas at a later date should they need to come up.
Heard, understood, and agreed with. Anything else? Okay, then at this point, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you.